Sydney Sweeney's parents went bankrupt chasing her acting dream. They sold everything they owned, moved from Washington to LA, and lived in one room while she auditioned. The marriage nearly collapsed under financial strain. Now Sydney makes $1 million per episode and is worth $40 million. This is the story of a family that bet everything on a 12-year-old's dream and how that gamble finally paid off. Watch till the end to see the moment everything changed. Spokane, Washington, 2009. 12-year-old Sydney Sweeney had a dream that seemed completely unrealistic for a girl from the Pacific Northwest. She wanted to be an actress, not local theater, not commercials in Seattle. She wanted Hollywood, and she knew her middle-class parents would never agree unless she could prove it wasn't just a childish fantasy. So Sydney did something extraordinary. She created a 5-year business presentation projecting the costs, potential returns, and realistic pathways to an acting career. Think about that for a moment. Most 12-year-olds ask for acting classes. Sydney created a business plan with financial projections. Her parents, her father was an attorney, her mother worked in the medical field, reviewed the presentation. They saw a daughter who wasn't just dreaming, but planning. A kid who understood this would require sacrifice and was serious about making it work. So they made a decision that would nearly destroy their family, but ultimately change all their lives. They said yes, and they went all in. The Sweeney family sold their house in Spokane, sold their cars, liquidated their savings. Everything they'd built over decades of work went toward funding Sydney's acting dream. They moved to Los Angeles, where rent was astronomical, competition was brutal, and success stories were rare enough to make lottery winners look common. And then reality hit harder than anyone anticipated. LA isn't just expensive, it's devastatingly expensive for families without stable income. Sydney needed acting classes, headshots, demo reels, transportation to auditions. Every audition meant gas money, every callback meant missing work. Her parents weren't wealthy Hollywood insiders with safety nets. They were working people who'd bet everything on their daughter's talent and drive. The money ran out faster than projected. The Sweeney family went bankrupt, not slowly, not gradually, but completely. At one point, the entire family was living in a single room, sharing space in ways that would strain any family's bonds. The financial pressure was crushing. The sacrifice was immense, and young Sydney carried the weight of knowing that her dream had destroyed her family's financial security. The guilt was overwhelming. Every failed audition felt like proof she'd wasted her parents' sacrifice. Every role that went to someone else meant more months of poverty, more strain on her parents' marriage, more doubt about whether the gamble would ever pay off. Her parents' marriage began to crack under the pressure. Money problems destroy relationships, and the Sweeneys were dealing with not just ordinary financial stress, but complete bankruptcy, all because they'd believed in their daughter's dream. The arguments were about bills, but they were really about the terrifying question: did we make a catastrophic mistake? The thing about Hollywood that nobody tells you is this: even talented people spend years in obscurity. Sydney was booking work, small guest spots, minor roles, the kind of credits that look impressive to people outside the industry but pay poverty wages and don't lead anywhere obvious. She appeared on 90210, Criminal Minds, Grey's Anatomy, Pretty Little Liars. These are major shows, and for most actors, booking even one episode is cause for celebration. But Sydney was booking multiple episodes across multiple series, and still couldn't afford to move her family out of that single room. The gap between working actress and successful actress was a chasm that seemed impossible to cross. Every audition carried impossible weight. Most actors deal with rejection as part of the process. For Sydney, every rejection meant more time living in one room, more strain on her parents' marriage, more doubt about whether she'd destroyed her family for nothing. The psychological pressure was crushing in ways that successful actors years later struggle to articulate. Her parents tried to be supportive, but the financial reality was brutal. They'd bankrupted themselves for this dream, and years later, it still wasn't paying off. The doubt wasn't spoken aloud, but it hung in the air. Was this all a mistake? Should we have stayed in Spokane? Did we ruin our lives for nothing? Sydney kept auditioning, not because she was naive about the odds, not because she didn't understand the sacrifice, but because quitting would mean her parents' bankruptcy was for nothing. The only way to justify what her family had endured endured was to succeed at a level that made the sacrifice worth it. Guest appearances continued: In the Vault, The Handmaid's Tale, Sharp Objects. Each role was slightly bigger, slightly more visible. Industry people started noticing her name. Casting directors began remembering her auditions. The foundation was being built, brick by brick, but the house still seemed impossibly far from completion. 2018, Netflix released Everything Sucks, a coming-of-age series set in the 1990s Oregon. Sydney played Emmeline, one of the main characters. The show was critically praised and developed a devoted fan base. Finally, Sydney was a series regular, not just a guest star popping in for an episode. Then Netflix canceled it after one season. For many actors, this would have been devastating, finally landing a lead role only to have it yanked away. But Everything Sucks had done something crucial. It proved Sydney could carry a series. Casting directors and producers saw her work and recognized something special. The breakthrough was coming, even if Sydney didn't know it yet. Then came The Handmaid's Tale. Sydney's recurring role as Eden Spencer in the dystopian drama's second season showcased her range in ways guest spots never could. She played a teenage bride in Gilead with heartbreaking vulnerability, and the performance got noticed by people who mattered in Hollywood. But 2019 was when everything truly exploded. Euphoria premiered on HBO. Sydney played Cassie Howard, a teenage girl navigating trauma, relationships, and self-worth in the midst of addiction, violence, and chaos. The role required vulnerability, emotional depth, and willingness to be exposed in ways that many actors would refuse. Sydney committed completely, and her performance became one of the show's breakout elements. Euphoria wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural phenomenon that defined Gen Z television. Suddenly, Sydney wasn't a struggling actress her family had bankrupted themselves for. She was part of one of the most talked about shows on television, and her performance was generating serious industry buzz. Then came The White Lotus in 2021, and Sydney proved Euphoria wasn't a fluke. Her portrayal of Olivia Mossbacher in Mike White's dark comedy earned her an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actress. Two major HBO hits in 2 years. Sydney Sweeney had arrived. Euphoria Season 2 aired in 2022, and this is where Sydney's compensation reflected her value. Reports indicated she earned approximately $1 million per episode, a staggering increase from her early career when she was barely scraping by. Think about what that means. The family that once lived in one room because they couldn't afford anything else now had a daughter earning $1 million per episode. The parents who'd gone bankrupt and nearly divorced over financial strain were now financially secure because their gamble paid off. But Sydney didn't just cash checks and forget where she came from. She launched 50/50 Films, her own production company, ensuring she'd have creative control and producer income beyond acting salary. She wasn't just building wealth, she was building an empire that would provide security beyond any single acting role. Sydney bought and renovated the Spokane home her family had lost, restoring it as a gift to her parents. The symbolism was powerful. The house they'd sold to fund her dream was bought back with money earned from that dream's success. The sacrifice had come full circle. She invested in her passion for restoring classic cars, not as frivolous spending, but as mechanical work that grounds her away from Hollywood's intensity. The blue-collar roots from Spokane never left, even as she attended premieres in designer gowns and earned millions per project. By 2024, Sydney's net worth hit approximately $40 million. The breakdown includes Euphoria earnings $8 million plus for season 2 alone, The White Lotus, and other HBO work $5 million plus. Film roles including Anyone But You, $10 million plus. Production company deals and back-end, $5 million plus. Endorsements and partnerships, $5 million plus. Real estate investments, $7 million plus. Anyone But You, Sydney's romantic comedy with Glenn Powell, became a surprise box office hit in late 2023 to early 2024, earning over $200 million worldwide and proving Sydney could carry a film beyond prestige TV. Marvel Studios came calling with future projects, solidifying her status as a genuine movie star, not just a television actress. Here's what makes Sydney's story different from typical Hollywood success narratives. Most actors who make it come from families that could afford to support their dreams without bankrupting themselves. Sydney's family literally sacrificed everything: home, savings, financial security, nearly their marriage, for her career. In interviews, Sydney has been candid about the guilt and pressure. "I felt so much guilt all the time because I was the reason my family lost everything. Every audition I didn't book, I felt like I was failing them. That kind of pressure would destroy most people. Knowing that your parents are bankrupt, living in one room, fighting about money, all because of your dream, creates psychological weight that's almost unbearable. Every role Sydney books now isn't just career advancement, it's validation that her family's sacrifice wasn't wasted. The restored Spokane home wasn't just a generous gift, it was Sydney saying, 'I'm sorry' and 'thank you' simultaneously. Sorry for the years of poverty and strain. Thank you for believing when nobody else did." The house represents the family's journey from bankruptcy back to security, made possible by the dream that nearly destroyed them. Strip away the Hollywood glamour, the HBO prestige, the $40 million net worth, and what does Sydney Sweeney's story actually teach? First, sometimes the biggest dreams require the biggest sacrifices. Sydney's family didn't half commit. They sold everything and went all in. That level of commitment is terrifying, risky, and not for everyone, but it's sometimes what success requires. Second, talent alone isn't enough. Sydney is tremendously talented, but so are thousands of actors waiting tables in LA. What separated her was resilience forged by knowing failure meant her family's bankruptcy was for nothing. That pressure either breaks you or makes you unbreakable. Third, success doesn't erase the struggle's psychological impact. Sydney is worth $40 million and still talks about the guilt and pressure from those years living in one room. The scars remain even after the wounds heal. Fourth, paying it back matters. Sydney didn't just get rich and forget her parents' sacrifice. She bought back their home, secured their future, and made sure the family that lost everything for her dream benefited from its success. And fifth, the American dream still exists, but it's not guaranteed. Sydney's family could have lost everything and never recovered. Thousands of families make similar gambles and fail. Sydney's success doesn't prove the system works. It proves that talent, timing, sacrifice, and resilience sometimes align perfectly. At 27, Sydney Sweeney isn't just an actress, she's a business. 50 for 50 Films produces content that showcases her range beyond ingenue roles. Marvel projects expand her commercial appeal. Endorsement deals with major brands leverage her 20+ million social media followers. Every project builds the empire that ensures her family's sacrifice was worth it. The next few years will determine whether Sydney becomes a generation-defining star or a very successful working actress. The trajectory suggests the former: Marvel franchises, rom-com stardom, HBO prestige, production company leverage. She's building something sustainable, not just riding one show's success. And somewhere in Spokane, the home that was sold to fund a 12-year-old's dream now belongs to the family again. Restored, secured, proof that sometimes betting everything on your kid's talent pays off beyond anyone's wildest projections. Sydney Sweeney's parents went bankrupt for her dream. Now she's worth $40 million, and their gamble looks like genius. Inspired by Sydney Sweeney's incredible journey from family bankruptcy to Hollywood stardom, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories of people whose families bet everything on their dreams. Drop a comment. Whose sacrifice to success story should we cover next?